Hey, welcome to this week's The Real Estate of Life with Kevin Riles. This week, I'm talking about opportunity zones, OZs. This is something that you guys need to really be aware of. This is the hottest topic in real estate and commercial real estate right now. I'm going to break down what you need to know about opportunity zones and how you can make some money and help communities and not pay taxes. DJ, hit that music, please.
Support for this program comes from the Digital Broadcasting Network, presenting podcasts and web series from everyday people who have an extraordinary passion to make the world a better place.
Welcome to The Real Estate of Life with Kevin Riles. This is your boy Kevin Riles, back for another information impacting, fly awesome podcast taping for this week. Want to thank you as always as I begin the show for your downloads, your listens, your subscriptions. We appreciate you being with us. I appreciate the fact that I'm getting questions from people that sometimes I don't know or I don't know well. So that means that people are listening. So we really do appreciate that. And we've gotten a little bit of a following here. So this week's episode, I'm going to focus for a couple minutes on opportunity zones. And so if you're a real estate investor or you're in this kind of real estate space, you've probably heard of opportunity zones. If you're not in this space or not a regular kind of consumer of business information and tax news, which most people are not, then you may not have heard of opportunity zones. And so as a part of the Tax Act of 2017 that was passed, one of the provisions was a concept called opportunity zones and opportunity zone funds. And so what opportunity zones are zones or areas in cities and in rural areas that have been designated by that state and in absentia by the federal government as a zone where if you invest or if a fund invests in that particular area by doing either ground up construction or purchasing an existing real estate or even investing in businesses, then there are significant tax benefits to that. And so this is an opportunity zone is essentially an economic development tool. And it was a method in the Tax Act that they put in to try to spur on development in areas that may not naturally develop. So there have been many attempts over the years to be able to do this in the past. I teach one of the classes I teach at Prairie View A&M University is called Community Development Finance. And in that class, we talk about the different tools that is used or are used, I should say, for community development, which essentially is economic development. And so you've had enterprise zones where if you start a business in a certain census tract, you get certain tax write-outs. You've had hub zones where, again, kind of that same deal. The difference with this opportunity zone is that it tries to funnel private capital into areas that would not normally develop. And so although it's a government component as far as creating the program, there's not necessarily a government component as it pertains to providing the funds. This actually helps private equity go to areas in which there's just not any natural development is going to happen because the area is a low to moderate income area or very rural area, or it's an urban area where it might be close to some things that are quote unquote not as economically distressed. But so with that being said, it's an opportunity for people to invest into neighborhoods that need the investment first and foremost. And of course, opportunity hopefully to invest in things that will make money. So the opportunity zones are located in, again, urban and rural areas. And what we'll do, I'll have Mr. Producer, I'll give him two links. One link will be to the IRS website that goes into a lot more detail than I'm going to go into today as far as what an opportunity zone is. And the other link will be a link to the map of where opportunity zones are located in your municipality. So for today, I'm going to talk about Houston. Houston has over 30 opportunity zones. Most of them, the major cluster is basically south of downtown along 288 in the kind of Sunnyside, South Park area. But there are also opportunity zones out off the Beltway in the A-Leaf area. And then there are opportunity zones up 290 near in Waller County. And so there are opportunity zones all over the state of Texas. And again, they're either usually in rural areas or urban areas or some suburban areas, or I'm putting suburban in air quotes as well. And so if your area, based on its the credentials that were set forth as far as the opportunity zone, is designated as an opportunity zone, what does that mean? What that means is that if investment takes place through what's called an opportunity zone fund, then that investor basically gets to defer their capital gains. So if an investor sells a property or sells some stock and they don't want to pay the capital gains tax on that, they can invest that gain in an opportunity zone fund. And depending on how long they stay in that fund and or how long that fund is in existence, they get to defer that tax. And so what I pulled out today just for my notes is the link that I'll put up, which is Opportunity Zone Frequently Asked Questions from the IRS. And so this document just is kind of a high level document as it pertains to what the rules are for the opportunity zones. But as far as the deferment, if you invest, let's say you sell a property, it's not your primary residence, you sell some individual houses or you sell some apartment complex or commercial property, and you invest that into an opportunity zone fund. If you leave that money in for at least 5 years, there's a 10% exclusion of the deferred gain. In other words, you basically get if your capital gains tax is say 25%, then 10% of that would go away. You would only pay 15% on that gain. If you leave it in 7 years, it's an additional, it becomes 15%. So 7 years, again, now it's 15%. If you leave it in for 10 years, then essentially you will not pay a capital gains tax. So there's an incentive for you to be in that investment for quite some time. This is game changing in that the way a 1031 exchange works, and we'll do a podcast on that as well, but the way a 1031 exchange works, when you sell and get that capital gain and you find another property, you exchange that property for another property, you're only deferring your capital gain. And you can, defer it in perpetuity if you keep buying properties. But the issue is eventually you're going to want access to that cash, and you're going to have to pay a capital gains tax based on your original basis. And I'm not trying to be too technical because I'm not a CPA at all. I just know in general how they work. I just completed a 1031 exchange. However, with an opportunity zone fund or investing in an opportunity zone, you essentially get to a point where you don't pay a tax if you leave the money in the fund. And so, again, to me, this is game changing in that, one, it has identified areas that need investment. And then two, for an individual investor or even corporate investor, it's an opportunity to invest in something that has an altruistic means, in other words, economic development in distressed areas, but at the same time, get a pretty significant tax gain. So in other words, if you sold something, your capital gains tax is 25%, then you would be paying $25,000 in taxes. If you deferred that, excuse me, Mr. Producer, that's the first time that's happened. If you defer that tax for through opportunity zone, then you could end up not having to pay that tax. And so that's pretty significant in terms of capital gains. And so the way the opportunity zone works as far as being able to take advantage of it is that you must invest in a certified opportunity zone fund. A certified opportunity zone fund. So in other words, this is not just you going to buy property in an opportunity zone. You have to buy property in a certified opportunity zone fund. So the question may become, well, where do I find these certified opportunity zone funds? Well, if you're in real estate right now, you're either getting emails or getting phone calls about people that have funds. However, most people don't know how to create a fund. And to create a fund, essentially you create an entity, a corporation or an LLC or a partnership. And right now the IRS has finally come out with the rules to be able to self-certify that fund, which basically means that you create a fund, create an entity just like you normally would when you buy a property. So for instance, in my particular case, I'm building a duplex right now in Sunnyside. I created Alvin Investments LLC to own that duplex because it's an investment for me. Well, when I do my taxes, there's a form that the IRS has created that would allow me to self-certify that particular entity as a qualified opportunity zone fund. Even though it's a single member fund, I could actually certify it myself. So there's no quote unquote underwriting for that fund. And basically the rules of the self-certification is that you would submit that particular document with your partnership or LLC tax returns. And that document basically asks you a series of questions. One, where is it located? Obviously, because it has to be located in the fund. Two, what percentage of monies are in the fund dedicated to an opportunity zone? It must be at least 90% dedicated to the opportunity zone fund. And then some other questions, but those are the two major questions. And so again, this may not be the most exciting information for, how the technical part of it, but it's game changing if you have an opportunity to be able to do some altruism and make money at the same time. So what I've seen out there, in this particular opportunity zone fund arena have been literally billions of dollars are being sought after and put in funds so that these projects can be done. Right now, what I'm actually seeing is that they're having an issue more so with finding projects than finding money, because nobody wants to pay capital gains tax. And so there are plenty of funds out there, but not enough projects because, again, these are areas that have some difficulty in terms of why natural development hasn't taken place or economic development hasn't taken place in the first place. So even in the area I just talked about in Houston, I always tell my students at Prairie View, and this is kind of land development or real estate development 101, businesses follow income. Businesses follow rooftops. Rooftops produce income. And so if the rooftops in a certain area don't produce a certain amount of income, you therefore have an issue where businesses don't necessarily want to locate or developers don't want to develop because they won't be able to sustain what they're developing. So developers and investors are having to think about what types of projects they want to be able to do in these particular areas. And that is kind of coming out, on a kind of multifamily workforce housing type of spectrum so that you can get that. Now, there are a couple of opportunity zone projects that I'm aware of that have gotten some press here in the Houston area. And those projects honestly are in technical opportunity zones, but they're really not for the residents that live in that area. They're in opportunity zones that buttress up against non-opportunity zones and are basically mixed use, multifamily, high-end type of projects. Which is great to bring the tax base up, but they're not necessarily helping the community. And so, what I actually plan to do here is this duplex seems to be, from a number standpoint, not even seems to be, it will be a success. And so my plan is to actually self-certify, raise some money and scale up and build some additional duplexes with my own opportunity zone fund. When I say my own, I'll be the sponsor of it and be able to sell investments in it. So this is something that you really want to pay attention to. Right now, this is the hottest thing going in real estate. The hottest thing going in commercial real estate is opportunity zones. In fact, at Prairie View, we're probably we will be dedicating our whole fall semester in all of our classes to some aspect of opportunity zones. And for my people of color out there, a lot of times we don't get to participate in wealth building activities in our own communities. And this is one area where we could essentially do this. You don't have to be a gazillionaire to be able to invest in opportunity zones. And depending on the fund, as little as $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, things of that nature, depending on the way the fund is set up, can be invested. So I highly recommend that you get additional information about opportunity zones because you want to be able to participate in the altruism of this, altruism being the goodness of this in trying to change neighborhoods, but you also want to be able to make money. And these funds work just like any other fund. If you invest in a particular fund, you want to be able to invest in something that is going to produce you a return. And so therefore, you can make money and build wealth as well. Probably the most important part of this is that these funds need to be put into action relatively quickly, because the benefit basically runs out at the end of 2026, December 31st, 2026. And so, and when I say the benefits, in other words, setting them up, if you want to get the full maximum amount of deferment, 2026 is the end of it. And so, again, if you get a chance, look below. I'm going to send Mr. Producer so he can provide links to where the opportunity zones are. Frequently asked questions about opportunity zones, so you can kind of read up on them, and then we'll put some information out there as to the potential fund that I'm setting up as well. And this is not an advertisement for me. I really just want you guys to know about opportunity zones, because again, I think they're wealth creation and tax abatement tools, all in with altruism. It's very seldom you get all three of those in one investment. So with that being said, that was my little primer on opportunity zones. I hope this was helpful information. Look below for those links. For those of you that are listening and not watching the video, if you go to kevinriles.com and click on podcasts, you'll see the video for this, and we'll have the links below. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention one other thing. You can invest in opportunity zone funds with stock and other things. Now, that's kind of above my pay grade. But one thing you can do is, if you have some stock out there that say that's not performing, or mutual funds that's not performing, but you've made a profit over time, you can sell that stock or sell those mutual funds or sell that investment. And instead of paying taxes on the gain, in other words, if you bought a stock for $1 10 years ago and now you're selling it for $30, and so you've made a $29 gain on that, instead of paying that $29 taxes on that $29, you can then within 180 days invest that into an opportunity zone fund, and that fund invests in these projects, and you defer the tax. And if you keep it in there for another 10 years, then you don't have to pay taxes on it. So again, that's like huge for those of you that have stagnant old 401ks or stagnant old mutual funds that haven't been really performing, or you feel like they've reached their kind of climax. Then this is another opportunity for you to be able to invest in the real estate, in the great projects, and again, to get the altruism. So I want to make sure that I let you know that this is for the capital gains, not just on selling real estate, but any taxable asset that you sell, you can roll that money over into a qualified fund, and that will qualify for this particular opportunity zone opportunity. So just wanted to make sure I said that. And as always, I appreciate you guys listening, and I'll see you next week. Do you have questions about any of the topics I'm talking about? If you have questions, let me know. Email me at kevin@kevinriles.com. Again, that's kevin@kevinriles.com. I'm going to do a podcast just on the questions that you guys are sending me. So feel free to send them to me. Again, that's kevin@kevinriles.com.